friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all have been doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a witchy content creator here on YouTube and several other platforms as well. All of my links are down below in the description if you would like to keep up with me. And if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back. It's really good to see you here. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another book review. I love doing book reviews. I feel like it's a great way to take everything that I've learned through reading and really put it into the ether, if you will. It's a fun way for me to make sure that I'm retaining what I'm reading. I'm also in the Red Thread Academy, which is an online traditional folkloric witchcraft academy, and we do book reports each of the years of the academy. And so I also did a book report on this. I will be leaving my book report link also in the description bar of this video. The book that I want to review today, this is not necessarily a new book, but it is new to me. It's been on my TBR for a while, and I'm just now getting a chance to fully read through it. But it's Cunning Words by our wonderful Marshall, the Witch of Southern Light, which if you're not familiar with him, you should definitely fall down the rabbit hole and check him out. Amazing content, amazing podcast, beautiful Instagram, and this book that Marshall has written and given as a gift to the community is incredible. Cunning Words, a grimoire of tales and magic, is a collection of stories, poetry, and rites inspired by the motivations and inclinations of the witch. The magic within this book is influenced by folkloric witchcraft and the cunning practitioners of new and old. In this book, the three mothers will teach you how to bless, heal, and curse. The seven holy siblings will teach you their celestial power. Spirits of the land and sea seek to make bargains, and the Lord of the Crossroads offers their hand. All you have to do is take it.
Absolutely incredible.
I got the paperback version of this. I do believe there's several versions that you can get. I got mine on Amazon. As far as affordability goes for this book, I think it's very affordable. I want to say I paid around $20 for this book, I think, which I feel like is a fairly good price. The thing about this book that really separates itself from the others is that this does not read as an instruction manual. This does not read as a beginner witch 101 type book. I definitely would say that this book is accessible in terms of, I would say it's beginner friendly for sure. But this reads more like a storybook, and I've not seen any other books on the market quite like this. It's really, truly, and genuinely one of a kind. And I loved reading this and getting some of the information from a witchy folktale sort of perspective, as opposed to you know how when you're reading witchy books sometimes and there's recipes and it's just boom, 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 here's the recipe, here's the ingredients, blah, 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 step by step. Okay, next recipe, boom, boom, boom. This is not like that at all. This is there's little recipes hidden throughout the folktales that I think, it really is kind of an exercise of cunning to be able to read these stories and see the magic that is really woven throughout the stories here that Marshall has created. I would also say that if you're familiar with Gemma Gary's work, The Black Toad, you're going to find a lot of threads of that within this. If you're familiar with the Vangelo Aradia, The Gospel of Witches, you're going to find some threads of that. If you're familiar with Roger J. Horne's work, you're going to find some threads of that. And I love how there's a lot of traditional witchcraft roots and influence here in this book, but Marshall really kind of carries it forward and really expands upon that gnosis, where we get to meet the seven holy siblings, which I think is such a powerful metaphor for high magic, for planetary magic, and really giving you Agrippa, but as a folk tale, which I think is so cool, because some of that hermetic and ceremonial magic work that's out there, I wouldn't necessarily say is accessible in the same way that this book is. I think meeting the seven holy siblings in this book and kind of talking about Sunday and the sun and the properties of this spirit that's associated with sun and Sunday is a really great way to kind of like teach planetary magic by sort of personifying them all as individual spirits. And I think that kind of makes planetary magic like a little bit more vibrant and accessible. I also really, really loved Mother Red Cap, Mother Green Cap, Mother Black Cap. I think that those stories are so fun, and pulling on those threads from the Black Toad and then really expanding on them even more. It was amazing. I loved reading about all of them, and I found myself kind of identifying people in my own life or people online that I kind of associate with those different mothers. As a queer woman myself, and as a trans woman, the story of Mother Redcap, I think, is so powerful and really, really just like pulled on my heartstrings. It's an absolutely beautiful story. And another thing that I really liked with this book is how much representation and queerness is really woven throughout the folktales that Marshall has put together here, but it feels very, very natural. Like, it doesn't feel forced or awkward. Sometimes I think authors or directors or producers, fill in the blank. Sometimes I think we push representation for representation's sake. Again, for myself as a trans woman, it gets kind of boring when I'm watching TV shows and there's a trans character and her entire character arc and story is all about her transition. Sometimes it's nice just to have characters that just also happen to be trans, but that's not necessarily the end all be all of their character arc and story. And I think that Marshall has executed that really, really well. And I love the way that the witch's devil is personified throughout the folktales in this. I love the yellow bird and the historical association. For those who know, you know. I'm gonna read you this first little part right here. When you open up the book, it says Cunning Words, a Grimoire of Tales and Magic by Marshall, the Witch of Southern Light. Meet me at the crossroads where the man in black does stand. Meet me at the crossroads where he offers me his hand. Meet me at the crossroads with the serpent and the crow. Meet me at the crossroads, to the other world we shall go. Just gives me chills. This is what the book looks like when you kind of open it up. I'll kind of pause it here in case you want to screenshot or take a look at this. So some of the chapter names are Spirit Contracts, The Hidden Book, First Flight, Our Mother in Red, Our Mother in Green, Damned Devil's Berries, The Three Wise Healers, Our Mother in Black, Open Roads, For the Love of Myrtle, Witch Bottles, The Seven Holy Siblings, Life, Death, and Pine Cones. Also, I loved the story in here. I've just thought of it, of the cicada. That was such a cool story, and weaving together this sort of folk practice of working with the spirit of the cicada, I thought was so clever. And where I live, I see cicada shells all the time, and I've collected them because that part of my crow brain is oh, go ahead and get that and bring that home. But I've used insects in some malefic working, but I really, really like the way that cicadas are used in this. There's a whole portion of the book for cunning rhymes, magic, and verse. So there's a cunning oil, an elixir of protection, crossroads nails, a lucky charm, bindweed. Then there's also a whole section for the cunning compendium, a codex of grimoires, rites, extrapolated charms, spells, and curses, things like chanting the beads, Grand's grimoire, the red, green, and black book, flying ointment, and a doll of dough, and some other stuff as well. So if you'd like to read some of my thoughts about this book, like I said, I'm going to link my book report down below that you're welcome to totally read, where I've kind of written a little bit more in detail about a lot of this, but just kind of skimming over the chapter summary here. The Hidden Book and the First Flight was absolutely amazing. I loved reading about Una and her grandmother, and just the way that the fair folk, if we will call them that, are kind of depicted is just very chef's kiss. I really, really love seeing folktales such as this and stories where the Fae are depicted in that way and not in like that sort of Hollywood Tinkerbell sort of way. So that was really refreshing. Also, in the first flight story, I loved how transgressive it is. I loved how queer it is. And I love how real it all felt. I mean, reading those stories felt very similar to some of my own experiences as a witch and flying to the Sabbath and meeting the devil. Okay, so this is editing jazz here, and I just wanted to hop on and make a quick note about this story because I really liked how when Marshall wrote this story, when the main character in that tale attends the Sabbath, other witches that she sees there, their face is kind of like cloaked or like veiled. She can kind of make out their body, but she can't quite fully make out like their identity. And that is just like such a trial record tradcraft thread right there. And I really appreciated Marshall kind of including that very small detail in the folktale because it hits on something so much deeper. And I also love how transgressive that folktale is and how she sort of changes her role in a specific scene in that folktale in a way that is kind of taboo for women. And, you know, as a doll, as the girl, I was just like, that, I feel so seen. I feel so seen right now in this story. And I also just like, I love the way that the devil is presented. I mean, just, I don't know. I can't say enough good things about it. That story, I think, really captures the essence of the witch's Sabbath in a way that is so difficult to put into words because it's such an ecstatic experience. And the story of the three wise healers with hair as red as blood and one with hair as black as like a raven's feathers and one with hair as fair as flax, like a blonde daughter, a black-haired daughter, a red-haired daughter, just absolute chef's kiss. I mean, by the red, white, and black and those trad colors and then seeing them kind of depicted and personified and the art that Marshall was inspired by, that's another thing is that like, I love how Marshall has like sort of taken some of these older threads, like I mentioned, from the Vangelo, from Agrippa, from Gemma Gary, and have really spun sort of a new tapestry, but out of these similar threads that sort of go back to something, right? And so I think if you're a newer practitioner, I would absolutely recommend this book. But even if you're a more experienced practitioner, I would absolutely recommend this book. I was talking with a friend earlier today about this and how I do think that if you have read some of Agrippa or some of the Vangelo or Gemma Gary's work or Roger J. Horn's work, I think that when you read this, you're gonna see some of those similar threads. And it makes you appreciate the tapestry that Marshall has woven even more because you see those individual threads that Marshall kind of pulls from and uses and then weaves that into Marshall's own UPG, which I would say for a lot of us, I think that this would even be SPG because when I'm reading these folktales, so much of this is resonating with me. Like I've heard this before. I'm familiar with this. I've heard this. I know this. That being said, even if you are a newer practitioner and you haven't read some of those works, I think that this would be a great introduction to start with this. And then, you know, you can go down the rabbit hole into the Vangelo if that is something that interests you. You can go down into the rabbit hole of following the Black Toad if that is something that interests you. I also say that Roger J. Horn's work and Gemma Gary's work is very influential in modern traditional witchcraft. I would also say that Keldon Mercury's work is phenomenal and amazing. I would say that Kobe Michael's work is phenomenal and amazing. And I would definitely say that Marshall's work is phenomenal and amazing. And I really feel like this book, like I've mentioned before, is such a gift to the community. You know, I think when it comes to traditional witchcraft, a lot of it can feel very heteronormative. And so having a book like this, I think really just kind of opens doors for more of the queer community to feel at home and to feel welcome within this practice. And I can definitely see this book being a book that years down the line, like people are still going to be referencing and are still going to be talking about. I would honestly have to give this book a 10 out of 10. I mean, the way that it's written is beautiful. You get all of those folktales, and then you also get a compendium of spells and charms inspired by those folktales. So it's really like several books kind of all in one. And there's things in this work that I'm looking forward to trying myself, like the chicken fortune bones. I have some bones from some wings that I had that I'm currently degreasing. I did not realize how long this process was going to take, but I'm working on that. Hopefully they should be done by the next Sabbath. I also really liked the crossroad nails, and I think that that is so cool and something that I would like to replicate in my own practice. So as far as readability, it's very approachable. It's very fun. It feels very young and like sprightly, and I don't know, it just feels very magical. Like you're reading these stories that a witch is telling you at like bedtime. Like it just feels fantastical. And so I would say it's very accessible. Also, the way that the book is written, I really appreciate the formatting as well, because that makes it very easy to read. You don't get lost in the pages. If anything, you really get pulled in because of how it's written and because of the formatting. And then price-wise, I mean, $20, that's fairly affordable, I would say. I mean, I think that's a pretty good price for a book like this. If you're interested in American traditional witchcraft, if you're interested in traditional witchcraft, this is definitely a book that you will want to pick up. Like I said, regardless of if you are experienced or if you are newer, I think that this is a book that you will want to read. If you have already read this book, and this book has been out for a little while now, so this is not necessarily new, but if you have already read this book, I would love to hear what you thought of it. And if you are going to read this book, I would love to know what you think of it when you are done reading it. Another great thing about this book is that you can really just pick it up and put it down. Because the way that the book is written, one story a day if you wanted to. You could read one story a night. I found myself really just kind of sucked into this book entirely, and I was just turning the pages, just really consuming all that I could from this book. And I was like taking pictures while I was reading and like posting in our Coven's group chat, like, check this out, look at this, let's do this, let's try this, what do you think of this? Yeah, I really liked this book. Marshall, if you are watching this, thank you again so much for writing this book. I think it is such a gift to the community. It'll definitely be a book that is going to be on my shelf displayed. It'll definitely be a book that I recommend to friends and folk. And yeah, 10 out of 10 friend, would recommend. Hoping that here in the near future, I can get Marshall here on my channel. And so I can talk with Marshall a little bit more about this book. I would love to hear from Marshall about like how their practice has changed and what has come since this book has been released. Like, I would love to hear that. And also just, again, Marshall, thank you for writing this book. It is incredible. I hope that you are very proud of this work and what a blessing this is for the community. I hope that you all take care of yourself. Make sure that you're drinking your water. And until next time, blessed be, and I will see you in hell.